Hello? Okay, there we go. I'm sorry, we were muted there. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Hope you're doing well. That was a really loud clap. Super sorry about that. It is Tuesday evening, and I am coming to you on a y'all have been asking for some woo, and I know my woo fighters. They love me. They love them some woo, and this story kind of just fell into I don't know, my lap by accident. Yeah, just gotta make sure is my mic on? Okay. Sorry, guys. I just had to make sure my mic was on. Okay. All right. So you guys have been waiting for some woo. So it's time for some woo fighting. All right. So today we're going to talk about Tony Robbins. And you guys, I am like I hate self-help people. I hate these people that like have zero background in zero education in psychology. And then they pretend that they have all of the answers, and they prey on people that are vulnerable and having psychological issues and maybe like in a really bad space in their lives. And like if you think of self-help gurus, I know I've covered Teal Swan. I mean, she's kind of like new and she's like really mostly online. She does most of her stuff through like media, like social media. But if you think of like kind of the big granddaddy of self-help, I would think nobody becomes more omnipresent or noticeable than Tony Robbins, right? So Tony is a self-proclaimed guru. I don't know if you guys, I didn't see there was, for a while on Netflix, there was a documentary called Tony Robbins, I'm Not Your Guru, and it followed him through his 6-day seminar called, it's like the Dream Thump, oh my gosh, you guys, I got so sucked into this Pro Jared saga that I had everything laid out for this Tony Robbins thing that I've completely like. He has a 6-day seminar. It's like $6,000 to attend it, and it helps people sort of reach their maximum relationship potential. It's for people that are struggling in their relationships to sort of reconnect. He has this very, very outdated belief that, you know, there's two polarities within relationships, and every single relationship needs a female and a male. And, you know, the men are supposed to be like the take charge. They're logical and they make the decisions, and they are the ones that are like moving goal oriented. And then the women are supposed to be the ones that are, like seeking an emotional connection and communication. And in order for you to have correct balance in your relationship, you guys both have to have this like opposite polarity in order to work, kind of like two magnets is what he says. It's extremely outdated. It's extremely sexist. It assumes it assumes that women are basically like the emotional ones all the time. And, you know, I don't know like what your relationships are like, but in my home, I think my husband and I, we're very ebb and flow. Like there are times that he is very much more emotional than I am, and much more seeking an emotional connection than I am. And then there's times when I'm the one that's like seeking the emotional connection more. And I think we're both extremely pragmatic about our goals, and we're very goal oriented. So his sort of mindset is extremely like backward. It's very old fashioned. And then he also has this really big thing about how like victims, like victimhood is a mentality, and you can only, like, everything in your life is because of your victimhood. And as long as you can sort of uncover what your victimhood is and get over it, then all the possibilities of your life are like exponentially available. And he holds these ridiculous seminars, which the one that we're going to be talking about today is like the one we're going to be talking about today is like, it's a 6-day seminar. The price range is anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. It includes like 12-hour-a-day seminars in these humongous packed stadiums, or like arena type seating, huge auditoriums. And the people, they don't get to eat very much. They don't get a lot of water. They don't get a lot of breaks. They're kind of sleep deprived. It's very like a very high sensory experience with lots of music and videos and Tony talking and walking through the crowd and pulling people out to have them talk to him and share their stories. And, he has people come up on the stage and like unload their deepest, darkest secrets before the world. And women talk about their relationships and maybe previous abuses that they had in the past. And it's just very, when I was reading about it, it kind of reminded me of like so many of these self-help things. Like I went to a Landmark Forum workshop in in college. My friends got into this cult, and they brought me to like this, like, come to the Landmark Forum. And it sounded a lot like that, where like they want you to expose like all of your deep, dark secrets to a bunch of strangers. And by like including these really dark secrets, somehow you are going to, break through that trauma and like come out a better person. The problem is that none of his practices are actually rooted in anything psychological. He has zero training, like zero, none. I was looking up his biography. Tony Robbins literally has a high school degree, a high school diploma. That's it. No college experience, no college education. With the self-help industry, there's zero credentials. That's Tony Robbins, Travis. Yeah, he's like, no, it's worse than Dr. Phil. I mean, like, he literally has no background, you guys, like zero education. And he like has written books, and he like has these very dedicated followers that sort of go from, one seminar to another. And he has multiple seminars that you can sign up for, multiple experiences. The one that we're sort of talking about is related primarily to relationships and helping people like overcome obstacles in their relationships. But there's a lot of layers to this story. I mean, on the surface, like, just what he does is really snake oil. I mean, he doesn't, like, his whole thing is like, your obstacles in life are engulfed in the fact that you believe you're a victim. And as soon as you can let go of your victimhood and just believe in yourself and stop calling yourself a victim, everything is possible. And it's just really simplistic. It's very degrading, especially to people that are victims. And what happens is that people that are very vulnerable, like people that are in mental breakdowns, people that are experiencing extremely tough times in their lives, going through some sort of mental illness, or, just, oh my gosh, just very, like, people in dark places are looking to this guy and looking for, help from him. And he's supposed to have all the answers, but instead of like, he doesn't have background, he doesn't have any psychology experience. And so these people are looking to him instead of actually getting like true psychological therapy, and it's negating and getting in the way of them getting real help. And people that are like truly suicidal are going to him, like hoping that he can help them overcome their suicidal tendencies. And obviously it doesn't work all the time. And, so people are like unduly harmed because they're going to him thinking he's going to help them, but he can't really help them because he doesn't offer them anything. And his approach is very one size fits all. So why he's in the news right now is because BuzzFeed, and he's been doing this for many, many, many years. So if you ever just want to like Google him, his name is Tony Robbins. We can thank Oprah Winfrey for making him a very well-known individual because she featured him. And he's also been out, he's like in the 80s and 90s, he was very big into having infomercials. He's written books. He's brought into like sports places to teach like all of the, get tough, overcome your obstacles, all that crap. It's nuts, you guys. This guy's nuts. So the reason why he's in the news right now is because BuzzFeed did like this year-long investigation into his practices and his background and what his seminars include. And I'll include that in the comments. I mean, it's a very extensive article. It includes lots and lots of transcripts or debriefings from when he's coming off the stage to discuss like what went right, what went wrong, what he thought worked, what didn't work. And then it also includes a lot of allegations from former employees and women that said that he used his position of power to sexually harass them. And we'll go through some of the screenshots, some of the most salacious stuff that came from the article. And then I have some clips that we can watch of things that he is, like an example of what he said during the Me Too movement and what he has said about the Me Too movement. And then I had, because we're going to do some woo fighting, because I know you guys have been missing the woo fighting, I have a bunch of information about, the dangers of victim blaming, some stuff from Harvard, an article from US Health News, just some stuff to sort of give you some understanding about why what he's doing is very dangerous. All right. So we'll take Mr. Robbins' picture off the video there. This stream is for all you woo fighters. You've been begging me for some woo. All right. All right. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, they got out of order as I was doing the Pro Jared stuff. Okay. So here's kind of an example. So what BuzzFeed's article was basically is accusing him of using his position of power to coerce women to try to develop, sexual relationships with him. He relentlessly pursued a couple women that were on his staff. When those women declined his requests to have relationships with him, they were fired. Multiple personal assistants came forward and said that they were required to take notes and dictations from him while he was naked in the shower. One discussed having to wake him up and drag his naked butt out of bed and then help him get dressed. A bodyguard came forward and said that it was his job to find women for him to hook up with, and basically using his power and influence to manipulate women into relationships with him that are inappropriate because he's, the guru, and he used that to his advantage. And then, there's allegations of him mishandling his power and his influence. There's allegations of him being extremely inappropriate with the women that he brings on stage. And then there's allegations of him just using really very harmful techniques with rape victims and domestic abuse survivors, because what he's telling these people is very harmful and could potentially get them it re-victimizes them. So some of the allegations that came forward, and these came from transcripts. So the thing is BuzzFeed was able to get through and find like pages and pages and pages of transcripts. And in one of them, he says, so I went around the room and I found this one woman who was crying, and she started to talk and she started to cry about her father, how her father left when she was 7 and rejected her. And then this man had raped her. And I said the truth, which no one would say to her, is she's effing using all this stuff to try to control men. And that is complete horse shit. What did happen, but it did happen, but I handled it in a way that was so elegant. I was direct, and I cut her off, but I was warm. It was fantastic. So he is of this belief that women use like their past trauma to manipulate and control men. And so he told a rape victim that she just needed to get over it, and she was using that experience to like control the men in her life. Can you imagine? Like, I'm a rape victim. If someone said that to me, that's victimizing. And then here was another example. It was the slowest one in the world because he was so unresourceful. So I thought, okay, I'm either going to solve it here or enough. And this is about orgasms. So he talks about orgasms with his people. So I used orgasm or masturbation or something, and it was great because, I said that's why, and sounds like she did masterisms, and that's why you're suicidal, I went to a piece, so I used humor, I break it, I got to the audience, I used this audience to get her up, and then she went beyond the range we asked for. Like he's telling a woman that is suicidal that she just needs to have an orgasm, and that will help. And then this one is about, I'll just read this. So they're talking about this woman that he processed. And that's what he calls it when he brings them up on stage and he processes them. And he says, she had love on her values list, but her rules for love or her association to love are all just unbelievably horrible, hostile, and painful. And so I was thinking, okay, rather than go into why and the where for all that, rather than creating a new value structure, just change her association, just change the anchoraging with it. And I knew if I was going to do it, since it was so severe, I had to go for something else. So I started to look for a reference since it's around relationships and it was intimate. So I looked for a sexual reference. But then I clarified the sexual reference as not to only being sensual, but that was truly loving, because I know that's what she needed. So I used the jolt of sexual to jar her state, and then just like everything else I've done, I then honed it down, refined it down to sex where there was a sensual, but there was a real loving place. And so I could use that. And fortunately, there was such a reference for her that she really just anchored it. Sounds like Babe. By massive breaking her pattern, by doing the unexpected, by doing sexual aspects, how to touch her breasts. So like he tells this woman who's like having a horrible relationship, the reason why is because she just needs to touch her breasts and love her breasts. And he fondles her breasts. And then he shows her breasts. Yes, Teresa, my dog is alive. That is Frida. She is sleeping. So anyway, we went through the process of having her associate. And I first hand her do it in a humorous way, which was really good because she couldn't do it in a loving way. So sounds like I made these funny tones and I love, loves me, but I just did it as an incantation. I did it in a humorous, silly way, dumb ways. And then I said, so he basically is like telling this woman that in order for her to love herself, all she has to do is just like rub her breasts. And he has her rub her breasts. And then she jumps up and down and says, I love me, I love me, I love me. And he talks to her about like which is the most like tender side and which is the more sensitive side. And it's like insane. And he's touching her. It's gross. I mean, in front of thousands of people, this is happening. So BuzzFeed, they tracked down a former bodyguard who spent more than a decade working for him. And he said on the condition of anonymity that he could not recall the specific, he couldn't recall specific situations where a woman was approached by a bodyguard, but he said that he did pass young, attractive women and he passed notes to them. And then he witnessed him making direct advances to women that attended his conference. He's also spoken publicly. So he's telling women to rub themselves. He's talking about masturbation in his like audiences. And then he's telling Playboy that, you know, they've sent me their panties up to events and limousines to get through security and turn up in my house to convince me they had an offer I couldn't refuse. I was beyond tempted at times. There was no drought for sure. I was kind of like a kid in a candy store. So basically using his position as in power to have sex with women that are coming to him for help. Like that's extremely like... That would be like your therapist using their position with you and having sex with you. Like that's illegal. But because there's zero regulation in this industry, there's nothing preventing him from doing that. And it's extremely, he's not on an equal relationship with them at all. They're looking to him as like, he has all of the answers. It's awful. A former personal assistant who said she worked for Robbins for around 18 months in the 1990s said he made her take notes while he showered. He would call you into the bathroom with him. Hey, come here. I need you to make a note for something. He just didn't care. He was too powerful. Another personal assistant said she worked for 18 months for him. Oh, and the assistant then, who was then in her 20s, asked only to be identified as B, said that on an occasion Robbins came out of the shower when she was working in his hotel room and he dropped his towel and she shouted to him to cover up, and she said he then left in tears. I called my parents and I was like, what in the world makes him think I would want any part of that? I mean, can you imagine just being at work and like you're just trying to do your job and he just like walks in and he just drops his towel? I mean, like he's trying to seduce you. That's like, it's exploitive, it's manipulative, it's so this was another person that worked for him in the 1990s and early 2000s. She told BuzzFeed that she had to work with him while he was nude. My job was I'd wake him up and pull his naked butt out of bed. I had to get his naked butt into the shower and into his suit. Robbins would also call her into the bathroom while he showered, and she said, I guess some people would think it was weird. She said, but she just saw it as part of her job. Yes, I could be a victim. I could go down that victim road, but I choose not to. Because that's what Tony tells people. Like, you are not a victim. Being a victim means you're weak. And so you need to not be a victim. It's really like... He's of that mindset that like victimhood is like a mentality, and it's like super old school and it's extremely like toxic. And so that's like his whole thing. Like you just don't be a victim and then you're not a victim, and don't see yourself as a victim and everything is fine. A fourth woman, Kay, she said she joined his crew in the late 1990s. She told BuzzFeed News that he singled her out immediately, frequently telling her she was beautiful. And then over a few years, she said he encouraged her to end 2 separate relationships, offered to fly her out to visit him, and gave her a secret phone number. The more she refused him, she said, the more he relentlessly pursued her. It's part of what he teaches, go after what you want, and he wants to acquire you as a woman. She recalled one seminar where he told the crowd to imagine they were having an orgasm. He then stepped down and whispered in her ear, "I want to see you have an orgasm." She told BuzzFeed. Again, Kay refused. "I'm not showing you anything," she recalled, thinking, "that feeds that monster." She then, she first said that she wanted to speak publicly about what happened, but then she changed her mind, and then she spoke on the condition with just her full name not being used. She said he's very connected, he's very powerful, and he's very wealthy, and he's able to squash bugs, and we are the bugs. And so that's what they do, is like, everyone that they spoke to was like literally afraid to speak out against him because he has so much money and he has such a humongous legal team that if you do speak out against him, he threatens legal action. He makes his employees sign NDAs. It's like ridiculous, and like no employer should be treating their employees like this. This is workplace sexual harassment, and in some cases, it's crossing lines into sexual misconduct. Another former staffer who did not consent to a sexual relationship with Robbins said she came to regret it. Well, who did consent to one said she came to regret it. The woman was asked to be identified only as Jay, worked as his personal assistant in the 90s, and when she was in her 20s, and he was more than a decade older than her. They began the affair soon after they started working together, but she said she was fired after his then wife became suspicious. She said then one day in the mid-2000s, a senior manager called her in for a meeting in an empty hotel restaurant in the middle of a Robbins event and fired her on the spot. This was another woman named Marie, and she, speaking to BuzzFeed on the condition of anonymity, an employee with knowledge of the incident explained the decision to fire Marie. An order came from above that she had to go because she was obsessed with Robbins. This was not the first time a woman had to be fired for similar reasons. And then there's not only are there issues with his sexual misconduct, there's also issues with he gets in over his head with people that have serious mental illness. And then his Date with Destiny, that's the seminar, he keeps them very sleep deprived. He gets them dehydrated. They don't get enough water. They are listening to him 12 hours a day. And so he ends up putting these people in really medically fragile positions because they don't have enough sleep. They're very weak. They're not eating enough. They're not getting water. And he said that his wife collapsed and began hallucinating and believing a clock was moving backward and a light bulb was the moon. And a staffer advised him that this was not uncommon and she would be back to normal the following day. Yet his wife continued to hallucinate after being admitted to the hospital and remained in a poor mental state after the event. The couple did not respond to repeated requests from them for a comment. And then they forwarded it to his former bodyguard, who said the reality is there is collateral emotional and physical damage at Date with Destiny. There always has been. In a room full of every personality disorder and emotional need and financial need, it goes without saying. He said he had flagged the problem repeatedly, but it falls short of being taken seriously enough. So he hears over and over and over that people are feeling ill and they don't feel good and they literally do nothing about it. Okay, and then this one is horrible. So in this specific case, he's talking about a woman that admits to being in an emotionally abusive relationship. And he tells her, what the F is emotional abuse? Are you effing weak that someone can't tell you with passion that they are effing feel without them abusing you? So she's telling him that her husband is emotionally and verbally abusive, and he's accusing her and saying no, he's not. What if he's just passionately telling you what he wants? And she then told him, well, there has been physical violence. And he says, what led to that? What role did you play? I'm not suggesting there's an excuse for hitting a woman, you so hear me, but I also want to know that people don't just act a certain effing way. So he's implying that her husband hitting her, she must have done something. And what role did you play that made him hit you? Like, seriously. When she began to describe the violence details she asked BuzzFeed not to publish, Robbins interrupted her and he said her husband sounds like somebody that actually wants to engage with you because he loves you. And he said, what I find when I usually dig in is that when they call abuse is relabeling of they didn't like what the person said or did. He later turned back to the crowd and said she's lying to herself. She's done it so often she doesn't even know the difference between a truth and a lie anymore. He has loved you. He has looked out for you. Does he put up with you when you've been a crazy bee? Have you ever been a crazy bee? Ever? Probably yes, she said. The crowd laughed. The song, Why Does My Heart Feel So Bad by Moby began to play on the speakers. Like, this is how he handles a woman. That's literally admitting to him that her husband beats her and he's verbally abusive. And he's like, well, what did you do to deserve it? Did he put up with you when you acted badly? Like, this is what people are paying $5,000 to $6,000 for. The dog is alive, you guys. Frida is alive. I promise. And then he had something to say about, we're already characterizing it as emotional violence. There's no effing thing. Someone can say F you and F you effing asshole, and it doesn't do a thing to you unless you do it. If a child came to you and said, purple eyes, you have ugly purple eyes, we should go emotional violence? Or would you just slap the S out of the kid? Is that what you do? Would you go report that? Would you put it on the internet? Would you tell people your child's emotionally abusive? Some parents actually do that now. What the F? When did you become an effing child and your kid's in charge? And are you effing stupid and weak? Are you allowing the culture to take control over your own mind by a few words because they allow you to feel significant and certain? Seriously. You guys, emotional abuse doesn't exist. And he thinks that women with any of their victimness or any of the like trauma and pain that women have, they're manipulating men. And that's like a common theme. I saw it over and over and over again. He talks about how he's like helping this couple in therapy, and he says the young girl who is manipulating her past pain, and that's when what's so great is, sounds like that everyone in the room may be pissed at me for negating that. So I mind read what they've been pissed off about, and I still told the truth that she's manipulating it. I don't support anyone effing raping her or taking advantage of her, but I don't support her effing manipulating herself, men, and other people by trying to use that tool when it really not the primary experience of her life. So she's been raped, and he's just like, you're using that to your favor. And so I said, what are you guys feeling? Went around the room and I found this. Oh, I think I read that one. Yep. Okay. So I finished. Those are so this isn't kind of an example of him and what he has to say about victimhood and how he treats women. And, women are consistently looked at as the manipulators. Their experiences and the abuse they've gone through in their lives is inconsequential, and they're only making it a big deal because they're making it a big deal, not because it is. It's they're letting it control them, and if they can't move on from it, they're failing and they're not doing it right, and it's extremely toxic, and it re-victimizes the victim, and we'll go into that in a little bit. But I also wanted to just show you a little bit of information, a video. Now, he got into hot water a couple years ago because he made some comments about the Me Too movement. And someone at a date with Destiny actually like went at him and asked, like, confronted him about the very controversial things that he was saying, because he was telling women that it's like really inappropriate to like put someone out there, because it just, you only like call your abuser out to make yourself feel better. It doesn't really do anything. And he was like downplaying and making women feel bad for doing this. And so she confronts him about it. And there's this very uncomfortable exchange that comes out of it. And I just want to show you a little bit of what happened there.
I'm sorry, it's like Johnny, but with an N.
Oh, okay, Lenine. Sorry, this is echo. So Lenine, tell me something. What's your concern? You stood up, so that was that concern.
Yeah, I think I need to do a happy dance, because that's what I said I would do when I started feeling stressed.
Okay, give her a happy dance. Give her a hand. Nice job.
So I think you misunderstand the Me Too movement. I think the Me
Not for you personally. I'm not misunderstanding you. You can educate me. I'm telling you, I've read these. Because my life is about helping people have new choices. So when I see them, I've read so many, thousands. Have you read thousands? Or are you going to tell me what your experience of the Me Too movement is? Because I respect all of you. You can use the Me Too movement to be such a beautiful thing. I'm not knocking the Me Too movement. I'm knocking victimhood. Raise your hand if you follow it. And I'm not suggesting you have to agree with me. I'm just suggesting you consider what its impact is. Look at these people and see what is empowerment. Anger is not empowerment. What you're seeing is people making themselves significant by making somebody else wrong and getting certainty. And there's nothing wrong with that, it just won't make you happy. It won't make them better, it won't make you better. And oh, by the way, what did Jesus say, regardless of religious belief? Because you can be anybody, you don't have to be Jesus. But who should throw the stone? You shouldn't do that stone if you live in a fucking glass house. Is there any one of us that hasn't done something that we prefer we'd not, or that we're embarrassed by, or was hurtfully remembered to? Who here has never done anything of that nature in your life? Raise your hand. One liar. Thank you. So I'm not knocking the Me Too movement. I'm knocking victimhood. If you use the Me Too movement to try to get significance and certainty by attacking and destroying someone else, you haven't thrown an ounce. All you've done is basically use a drug called significance to make yourself feel good. Or certainty. Raise your hand if you see this. Questions, comment?
So my comment is that I hear you as characterizing the Me Too movement. Certainly there are people who are using it for their own personal devices. But there are also a significant number of people who are using it not to relive whatever may or happened to them, but to make it safe for the young women who are now. And I think you do the whole movement a disservice by characterizing what you have. I love you, so please.
I don't feel attacked in any way. I'm glad you did this. The reason I want to engage is because I don't want to be misinterpreted. You're using it differently than some other people. What I'm suggesting to you is it's easy to see when a person gets angry and attacks. Rarely, watch this. Come over here.
This part is horrible, you guys. Horrible.
Watch. Put out your fist. Why are you pushing back? I didn't tell you to push back. Why are you pushing back? Why are you pushing so hard? So you're telling me that the harder I push, the more you're going to comply and I'm going to be safe.
Well, Choker says don't resist.
I don't give a fuck what Chopra says. I know, Mr. Chopra. This has nothing to do with it. You're still resisting. She's still pushing on me. I've pointed out she's still pushing on me. Why is she still pushing? And when you push someone else, it doesn't make you more safe. It just makes them angry.
It's
I can tell you,
awareness. It's not pushing.
in Hollywood, where most of this is the most intense, I have so many clients there. And I talk to men all the time, and it breaks my heart for women, not for men. Because I just was somebody the other day, very famous man, very powerful man, who's saying how stressed he is because he interviewed 3 people that day. One was a woman, 2 were men. The woman was better qualified, but she was very attractive, and he knew I can't have him around because it's too big a risk, and he hired somebody else. I've had a dozen men tell me this. So I want you to know, I'm not telling you what to do.
Yes. And it's
No,
a
you're
lame
giving me
excuse.
an excuse. You're telling me that the more I push, the more I'm going to be safe. Is it true? It's not. Listen to me. There are plenty of women in this room and plenty of different point of view. I'm not asking you to take my point of view. I'm asking you to consider how you use anything, technology, Me Too, anything. I haven't made technology wrong either. Some people, you made technology wrong. No, it's we want to use it, not let it use us. Raise your hand if you follow us. And if you and I are going to free ourselves, freedom doesn't come from more anger, and freedom comes from. So I think anyone who's been hurt should be able to express it. They should be able to go get restitution, should be able to solve any
So are minorities not supposed to protest?
What I'm not
or
supportive
not
of
supposed to
is
do anything?
victimhood. How are we talking? I didn't say you were.
What I'm saying is,
I didn't say you were. I never said that you personally were using it that way. I said if you see people using it that way, stop. If you catch yourself using it that way, stop. How many of you have found technology was supposed to make you less stressed and give you more time? How many remember that story? How's that shit working for you so far? How many have more stress in their lives than you did before? But how many are also more productive? So everything can be a two-edged sword. I'm just trying to get you to see where the sword is hurting. Because for every action, there's an equal and opposite what? I'm not talking to you as a man, I'm talking to you as a human being that's dealt with tens of millions of people from 100 countries. And here's what I can tell you. There are patterns that make you angry, there are patterns that make you sad, there are patterns of excitement, there are patterns that make you grateful. You gotta choose your patterns well. Because otherwise, you'll let the culture choose them for you. And if you choose them for yourself, I have no problem.
you are a leader and an influential man.
Yes.
And you are doing a disservice, in my opinion, to the Me Too movement and this movement. And I wish you are doing a disservice
I
to the Me
can't do
Too
the service because everyone in this room that believes whatever she believes will continue to do it.
It's not just about what women believe. It's about what people believe. Just because you were talking to me as a man to a woman, I'm not talking to you as a woman to a man. I'm talking to you person to person.
I understand. What are you telling me different than what I said? I told you some people misuse it, and you're telling me you don't. I'm not saying you
But
did.
you characterize the entire movement.
I didn't try to move when I said this is something they will use it.
Because that's what I heard.
Did you ever watch Saturday Night Live? There's a part where she goes, never mind. So I'm glad you brought it up because it's not what I'm telling you. I'm not saying the movement is wrong. I'm saying everything has a consequence. Raise your hand if you heard me. And you want to use things in a way that doesn't addict you to your problems, and you don't want to be a victim. If you use it, doesn't make you a victim. I'm not thrilled. And it is nothing. There's a million ways to communicate. It's just the avenue we're using now. I think women being treated fairly, fine. My office is filled. My company is 70% women. That's a fact. I love women. I love their back. I'm not criticizing any woman. I'm saying man or woman. If you get in a pattern of victimization, who's it going to hurt? Nice and loud. Who's it going to hurt? That's right. So I'm not saying you're using it wrong. I never even addressed you personally.
I'm talking about the Me Too movement.
No, I'm talking about how it's used, how technology is used, how belief systems are used. Do you hear me? I'm not going to be inauthentic and say I'm sorry about something I'm not sorry about. I'm not sorry for all of it. This is what so many people are doing. They're saying you're sorry when they're not, just to comply. I'm not here to comply. I'm here to free people from pain. And by the way, should I say I'm sorry for her misinterpreting me? She just told me I misunderstood. So hear me now. I can do the easy thing and not bringing this up. I'm only bringing it up because I give a shit for everybody. I spent a life to help people be free of pain. And when I see a pattern that some people are using creates more pain, I just want you to be aware of it. You can disagree with me and tell me I'm full of shit. I have no problem with that. But what I wouldn't do is be inauthentic. If be inauthentic, go, oh no, it's fine. Everybody should apply.
All right. So that's enough, you guys. I think you kind of get the point here. is that he is like this woman is trying to tell him that like he's completely mischaracterizing the Me Too movement, and he's basically insinuating that anyone that comes forward to accuse their accuser, like for instance, like I publicly during that time named my perpetrator. And so he is saying that like anyone that does that is just doing that so that they feel significant. So somehow like you're just exposing your perpetrator so that you feel better about yourself. And that's not what the Me Too movement was about at all. The Me Too movement was about women like me who have been raped not having law enforcement do anything about it, even though my story and what happened to me was clearly extremely questionable. My kit was never processed. My perpetrator lied. There was no justice. So the only thing that I had left was naming him publicly so other people knew what he did to me. And that's what it was about. It was sharing our truth, showing that one out of 6 women is a victim of this. And that's what it was about. Saying that, we're not going to be silent anymore. Less than 1% of men that perpetrate these crimes against women are incarcerated. Less than 1%. 99% of men get away with it. And it's because of it's because of that mentality. It's a victim. You don't need to say anything. You're only trying to make it like significant. You're not doing that to actually like help yourself. You know what did help me? It did help me. It helped me heal by exposing him and telling the world like this is what he did to me. Because for 10 years, I kept my perpetrator's name completely silent. I protected him because he came from a very influential family. I was scared of his financial damage he could do to me or what he could do to ruin me. I was scared to expose him because we went to high school together. I was scared that people were going to call me a liar. And that's what victim blaming does, is it keeps women like me silent. And Tony is perpetuating that and forcing victims to remain silent because when they do try to speak up, they're told they're wrong. They're told they're trying to do it for significance. They're told and he used his power and his exertion and he didn't let her talk. I mean, did you notice like she couldn't even speak? Like all he wants to do is listen to himself. And he's not helping people, you guys. This is very harmful. I'm very triggered by watching that as someone who has been raped, because that the moment that I was actually able to name my perpetrator and feel like other people were hearing me and it was accepted, instead of being called a liar, my friends from like that I hadn't spoken to for like 20 years from high school, they like agreed, they were like reaching out to me and like apologizing to me and like telling me like they believed me because they knew he was like a creep. And for the first time in my life, I felt validated and I felt like I'm not crazy. And he's controlling the narrative and he's minimizing the victimization that happens to so many women every single day. And he used his power by like pushing her back, and he puffed out his chest, and he's domineering, and he stood over her. I mean, he like steamrolled her. Didn't let her say a thing. I hate him. But I also have some information that I want to share so that this isn't just me like telling you that he's not a good person. I want to show you why what he's doing with sources so that, you can, when this stuff comes up or when, you're ever, So I found a bunch of different sites that I'm going to show it to you. So there was an article on Scientific America about sort of the dangers of these self-help people. And I kind of liked this quote, and it said that they take advantage of the dualism of victimization and empowerment. And it, like a religion, it defines people between like a survivor and a victim. They always go to like your inner child, and it must be trauma from your childhood and like that are playing over in your mind. And the only way that you're going to get better is if you actually like get rid of that. And then if you don't get rid of it, it's your fault because you didn't try hard enough. So it's like the same pattern with nearly all of them. Like they're all like, you have trauma in your life. That's a racket in your life, or that's what the Landmark Forum calls it. And with him, I don't even remember what he was calling it, but they're using this like lingo. It's like, you're the victim. You just need to get over your victimhoodness. And if you get over your victimhoodness, everything will be fine. So then I was like, okay, let's talk about victim blaming. So I went to Harvard. Harvard's a pretty good source, right? So Harvard says that victim blaming is the attitude which suggests that the victim rather than the perpetrator bears responsibility for the assault. Victim blaming occurs when it's assumed that an individual did something to provoke the violence by actions, words, or dress. Many people would rather believe that someone caused their own misfortune because it makes the world seem like a safer place. But victim blaming is a major reason that survivors of sexual and domestic violence do not report their assaults. Many survivors are already grappling with feelings of guilt and shame for what has happened. It is essential that administrators do not reinforce these feelings. No matter what they were wearing, how much they had to drink, or whether they had previously consensual relationships with the perpetrator, the victim should not be blamed. It is never the victim's fault. Victim blaming advice would be to drink less. If it works at all to lessen the threat of violence for one individual, merely displaces the violence. It's equivalent of saying you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the slowest friend. It's essentially telling the potential victim to make sure the rapist rapes someone else. So you guys just don't drink. Then you won't get raped. But then your friend who drinks too much, she might. So that's from Harvard. And then I found this article on U.S. Health News, which I thought was pretty helpful here. It had a bunch of quotes in it, and that's why I've just pulled up the whole article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it basically talks about how they interviewed a psychologist named Beverly Engel, and she said that we are a culture of victim blamers. The core of victim blaming is that we don't want to feel out of control. She said, since being victimized or learning that someone else was victimized threatens to shatter the illusion that we're always in control of what happens to us, and it runs counter to the notion rooted deeply in our society. Fighting for our freedom, being independent, fighting against controlling us, we have a whole history of that. Heroics aside, experts say the problem with such a mentality is that it often sparks a knee-jerk reaction to either quiet a person who has been abused to fix the abuse, going after a perpetrator but leaving the person who is abused without support. That makes it difficult for a person to talk openly about what happened to them, to be supported in his or her recovery, and to process the myriad of emotions from anger to grief. It also makes it less likely for a person to seek psychological treatment to address issues such as depression and post-traumatic stress disorder that may result from being abused. And then a second psychiatrist said that victim blaming is actually something that comes up all the time in sessions. It's really considered a secondary trauma or a secondary assault. Those who are blamed for abuse, report greater distress, increased amounts of depression. It usually complicates their post-traumatic stress disorder. If they're experiencing that because they're dealing with two different assaults, often we'll see an increase in suicidal ideation, and then it often decreases people's chances of reporting future abuses because they have fear they won't be believed, and they'll have to deal with the negative feedback of reporting it. they went on to say that no one ever deserves to be hurt. No one ever deserves to be abused, and victimization is real, and it's not something that you should diminish. And I think that's kind of really like, I was disappointed with, what he's doing to the women with the sexual stuff. But I think most concerning is this narrative that he's this very dangerous narrative, and specifically to women. And he seems to be extremely misogynistic and calling women manipulative and cunning. And it's harmful, you guys, extremely harmful. I know for me, and I don't know, if there's others of you that have gone through rape or sexual assault, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder. After it happened, I had flashbacks. I had periods of complete where I was extremely numb and not really present in what was going on. I would lose periods of time. Certain smells and scents would trigger me and elicit extremely emotional and violent responses. And a lot of my PTSD also was associated with the fact that instead of being believed by the police, I was rushed into an interrogation room and accused of lying and accused of making this up because I was a jealous, bitter woman. That's literally, I was told I was a slut. I was told that I was loose, that I was drunk, that I wanted it. And that messed my mind up. It messed my mind up for years to hear that. And I had nightmares, and I questioned myself for years. Did this really happen? Did this really, So when you're not believed, it really messes with your mind. And so you're dealing with the explicit exploitation and this extreme violation of the core of your womanhood. And then you have people completely dismissing that. And it just completely re-victimizes you over and over and over. And people that go through these, they love him or they hate him. And they're so brainwashed that they don't see the harm in what he's doing. So I guess my point in doing this stream isn't so much to be I know most of the people that follow me normally would never go to someone like this, but if you know someone that's considering attending one of his events, please have them check this video out, and please suggest that they not go, because anyone that's seeking out a self-help guru, what they really need instead is to talk to a psychologist. Using these people to help your psychological issues is preventing you from getting the real help that you need. And that's really the truth. And I am very grateful that I had amazing resources following my rape, because I went to the hospital right away. They put me in touch with counselors. So I had emergency counseling service. And then through my counselors, they put me in touch with a therapist that could help me. And then I worked with a therapist for over a year. And so not everyone has that. I was 27 when it happened. And so not everyone's there or able to process it or understand what to do, or they don't have the people around them to tell them what to do. So if you're going through that, do not go to one of these sessions. Find professional help. And that is not a self-help guru that has a high school diploma. Okay? He's a high school diploma. I have more education than him. And I am not an expert in any of this. But I do know that what he's doing is harmful. So, thank you guys. And if you want to know why why I cover sexual assault so much, is because I'm a victim. And I'm not afraid to say that. Do I live in my victimhood? No. It happened in 2007, and it's been 12 years. And this was the first year, this is incredible, but this is the first year that April 21st went past and I didn't even think about it. It didn't even go into my mind. For 11 years, every single day on April 21st, it was like the darkest day of my life. This was literally the first year that I didn't think about it. And you know why? It was because it was last year that I exposed who he was and I made everyone know who he was, and I didn't have to sit with that information anymore. So, yes, my dog is alive. You guys are so funny. All right. You can be sorry for me, but just know that this has driven me. It's one of the reasons I cover the kind of stuff that I do. And I will always speak out for anyone that's been abused and been violated, because we aren't believed and we are victimized over and over and over again. And so he's a predator. He's a snake oil salesman. And please, if any of you know anyone that's going to go to him, just please have them check this video out, or just tell them he's a scumbag. A scumbag. And yes, Frida is awake, you guys. Here. There's Frida. And there's Sweetie. And there's Mason, the cat. All right. All right, you guys. So that was the stream tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I appreciate you guys so much for being with me every night. And just, have a good night. Take care of yourself. I did another video earlier today. If you didn't check it out yet, it's about Pro Jared. That video will not be monetized because of the content that's on it. It's very sensitive, but it's a very important story. So I would encourage you watch that one. And then as always, if you want to support me by becoming a patron or buying me a cup of coffee on Ko-Fi, or, sharing my content, liking, subscribing, all of that, just make sure you do, and let your friends know about me. This channel's been growing and we've been adding a lot of people, and it's been super fun to see this audience grow. And I am super excited to have you guys with me every night. And as always, if there's topics that you want me to cover, please let me know and I'll look into it for you guys. But I am off for the rest of the night. Have a great night, you guys. Thank you so much for being with me. Know better, do better. Woo fighters.